All right. We are on, sir. I think we're on.
Right.
Hold on. Let me see. Yes, it is streaming. Hold on 1 second. Yep. Okay. All right. We're on the Speak Your Truth with Mark Ross podcast. I am your host, Mark Ross, and with me tonight is Thomas Wilson. I have Thomas Wilson here with me. Uh, Thomas is uh, a speaker and a mental health advocate, and he runs his company called RNH Creative. Uh, Before we get going, is there anything else that we need to know about you, Mr. Thomas?
Definitely. So I am an advocate. I'm also a storyteller, a youth mentor, many other things. And actually, I know it gets cut off on a lot of things, but my business is actually R&H Creative Advocacy and Storytelling. It gets thrown off a lot. It's a really long business name. I never realized how much until I got popular in my work, but no worries there whatsoever.
Cool, cool. Well, talk to us about your company, RNH Creative Advocacy, sir.
Definitely. So, all of my work, I do a wide variety of things, much like many business owners I know nowadays. It requires skills and all sets. But so, my storytelling is built around empathy based leadership and mindful practice. I work very hard as an advocate, business owner, storyteller, writer, journalist, all kinds of things to make sure that my business is built around the most person centered and empathy based leadership styles possible. I work with many underserved communities. I realize underserved is not always a popular term. It's one of the things I love about language. It is constantly evolving and
Sure.
constantly debated. But I also work with the mental health, neurodiverse, vision impaired community, LGBTQ plus, but really anyone who wants to experience kind of an alternative to traditional events. I know, like we were chatting earlier about sports and
Yeah.
my lack of interest in
Yeah.
and you're very much passionate for, and part of the reason I don't like them actually is for someone who's very deeply sensory sensitive myself and is also very much an introvert, which a lot of people don't realize how much of an introvert I am in the work that I do. Um, I've had a lot of experiences at big public events, at concerts, sporting events, where it just becomes too stimulating or too much over time.
Mm,
I have also spent, a couple $100s on a ticket that over time is just too much for me. I'm in a crowded space with potentially thousands or more people that I don't know. And I always reference concerts, partly because I have such a respect for concerts, but realistically, concerts are not designed for people with neurodiversity or sensory needs at all. They're constantly evolving, but I kind of view my business as the antithesis of things like that. They are designed for larger audiences or smaller audience. There is this very communal, intimate kind of experience you don't always get at larger events. But it's
mm,
also designed, no matter a person's needs, lived experience, diagnosis, whatever have you, it is designed to make people feel valued, make sure that it is sensory friendly and people can show up, attend the whole time without being burnt out. And just to reiterate one more time, I love concerts. I think they're great. But one of the primary things I've learned as someone who is sensory sensitive to my degree,
okay.
they are often loud. There's lots of stimuli. There's not always a well established space for people to go if it just gets too much. A
Okay.
lot of the time, you're stuck in a community space where your best option is a taxi. But if you're sensory overwhelmed,
Mm,
then you have a hard time finding a taxi. Or if you get someone who's a little gruff, that amplifies the anxiety. And again, concerts are fantastic. They have such a beautiful communal and artistic space. But like I said, my business is the antithesis of so much, that so much. And it's all designed no matter the experience, no matter the diagnosis, people can go actively participate with people, have their sensory needs met, their emotional need met, their physical needs met, while also having a really great communal and interactive experience. And that is all based around honoring my experience as a mental health and neurodiverse community member, but also constant input on how to make things better for the communities that are existing around the world.
Nice. Awesome. Um, I read your bio and you mentioned that you were a neurodiversity specialist.
Mm.
Break that down for us.
Definitely. And I love that you're asking me to break that down. I want to clarify for everyone listening, I myself am not like a doctor, or I'm not also someone who has been through med school of any kind, but I am a trained peer specialist. I am a trained mentor. I've been in this field for over 12 years now, working particularly with harder cases. And so when I say neurodiversity specialist, especially in my work, it is a very specific focus where I have been trained, I've gained the skill set through many, many third party trainings and educational programs on how to honor the needs, whatever they are, constantly expanding, constantly developed, to be able to on a person on a social, emotional, educational, and a variety of other factors. And in my work in particular, that is largely focused around mentorship and storytelling, being able to utilize creativity to emphasize that people can learn and help them learn on the basis in which they learn. Another big part of my work is challenging the mindset that if we teach people how we want them to learn versus if we teach them how they actually learn, we will there seems to be this very real kind of like the student isn't learning how I'm teaching them, so it's their fault.
Okay.
One of my focus is very much they aren't learning how I'm teaching them. So, how can I work with them to adapt the educational process so that they can learn the way they learn and the way they can best advocate for themselves?
Mm, okay. Okay. So basically you're finding ways of meeting them where they're at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Because I know you mentioned the word sensory and
Mhm.
lighting and all that stuff. So when it comes to young kids with autism, first off, before we go into that, let's talk about autism because that's a big part of what you do.
Mhm.
What explain what the symptoms are for kids that suffer from autism? I don't want to use the word suffer, but for
Yeah.
lack of conversation.
So there are so many things, and it's really so to be bluntly honest, it's really hard to kind of narrow it down just to symptoms. Autism is a really complex kind of constantly evolving thing, especially as we in the United States dive further into it. And there is a wide range of autism. Like I myself, I'm certain I have autism, though many people would say that I'm not autistic just based on how I talk and how I appear. But autism is something that can impact the developmental factors of an individual. It can make someone deeply sensory sensitive. It can make communication more difficult to happen. It can make it so that like one thing that I run into a lot is I try to challenge the mindset that if someone's on their phone while you're talking, that's not them ignoring you. That can well be that person kind of paying attention as best they can, but they need something in their hands. It's a focus mentality. It's a way in which the brain processes data and information.
Mm,
It's really complex, and it could really be its own whole conversation on it, some of which I
mm,
would very need much help from doctors. But at its core is a very complex diagnosis that has many, many needs. I know that's probably not exactly what you're looking for,
no,
but
that's fine.
I want to make sure not to overgeneralize or misrepresent.
Sure, sure, sure. Uh, and to all those that are listening and those that will tune in soon, if you guys have any questions about this topic for Mr. Thomas, please ask, and I will recite the question to him. Again, if you guys have any questions about this particular topic about autism, please ask, and I will relay the question to Thomas. uh, but thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I want to read off this statistic because I want to really understand the depth of the numbers of kids that are dealing with autism. This is from the CDC. It says about 1 in 36 children have been identified with autism spectrum disorder. The rates of children with autism are increasing. Factors include greater awareness of autism,
Mm.
changing diagnostic criteria, increased availability of services, and increase of parental age in more premature babies. With that said, have you witnessed an increase of, excuse me, autistic children come to your company for assistance?
Absolutely, yes. I really appreciate you reading that out, specifically the component of increased diagnosis. That is so important, especially to consider. Like, I know people in the younger generations, they may not fully realize this, but there was a long time in American society in particular where like autistic was like a hush hush word, and it was also like a deeply derogatory word. I mean, it
Mhm.
was even deeply derogatory for me growing up in the 90s.
Sure.
Like it was a thing. You didn't want to talk about it. But a huge component of that, especially people coming to me at a younger age, is the reality that one of the great things about a modern era is people are far more willing to be diagnosed than ever. It's being seen as this like cultural benefit versus especially what I grew up with and people long before me grew up with, where mental health was like a derogatory slur in some people's
Mm,
minds and all
mm,
of these things.
hmm.
And so
Yeah.
there is this massive growth, but a big part of that is all as well that I've noticed is adults finally getting noticed and diagnosed. And I'm not just talking about people in their 30s or their 20s. I have talked to adults in their 60s and 70s that have found out that they have autism and like sensory processing needs and so much more just around autism. And it's a really fascinating time to be alive because I mean, I'll be honest with you, the amount of jokes that I've heard from people deeply out of touch just growing up about sending people into the with autism into the military and that's how you deal with them was
Mm,
astronomically high, and
mm,
it's very
mm.
upsetting to think about in any realm. um but those are a lot of the culture things so many of us grew up with. And just to kind of wrap this up so I don't ramble and ramble, because this topic is a huge passion of mine.
Sure, sure.
I am getting people, not just youth, but adults and people past 60 expressing interest in what I do.
Really?
And what I love about that is it proves that this idea of diagnosis, and I realize not everyone wants to be diagnosed. There's a lot of toxicity in the even in today that can happen with it. But the amount of people who find out that they have autism and their first reaction nowadays is, how do I get treatment? How do I handle this? Is this absolutely gorgeous transition in so many societies' opinion of mental health and care.
Mm. Wow. Because, it was interesting to see that one of the reasons that the numbers are growing is because people are becoming more aware of it. And so as they become more aware of it, they ask themselves questions like, hey, what if I'm dealing with this? Or what if my son or daughter is dealing with this? The least I can do is get checked or check out
Mhm.
my kids to see if they fall into the spectrum. And if they do, or if we do, what do we do about it? Yeah, yeah. So that's a very interesting find. So um, that's cool. What got you involved into this type of work, Thomas?
Um, so I always say, as someone living in this community, the mental health community, the neurodiverse, and I'm sure probably others that I'm not even fully aware of at this point, my diagnostic journey. I mentioned it really briefly, but my experience growing up in the 90s and 2000s when it came to mental health and the neurodiversity I didn't know I had, and honestly, my experience in healthcare and through schools and a variety of programs, it was deeply upsetting. Quick overview. When I was a kid in, I think, like second grade,
Sure.
I was told I had the IQ of a 40-year-old. I was told I was going to be this amazing individual. And then I experienced a significant loss, and my mental health needs really kicked in. And at that young age, that transitioned from me being a prodigy to me becoming and I realized people are not going to like this because I'm sure many people have heard this term and been labeled as it. I became the problem student
Mm,
or the problem child in a
mm,
lot of my friends' minds. I even heard that from family friends, which we stopped being friends with over time very quickly because of that. But I learned really quickly as a youth that there are a few things. There's so much bias and stigma and ableism that is thrown at kids, even as a young age, even within institutions that are supposed to protect us. And as I grew, I learned even more of the fractures in the school system.
mm,
I started developing what I wanted my idea to empathy to be. And as I continued to heal and get a handle on it, I had spent time as a reading tutor working with youth who were struggling in the school system. I've worked as a day program provider, and um, I ended up at my day job, which I've been at for almost 11 years now, loving working with the community. But in 2021, I believe, the last few years have been a blur. I opened up my own business, R&H Creative Advocacy, because I wanted to be a storyteller my entire life. And I kind of stumbled into Dungeons and Dragons and other events I did because I learned very quickly your expectations of your business might not be a reality the way that you
mm,
want them to be. And to be successful, you have to adapt.
mm.
And ever since I started doing my first event, I've just had this passionate love for what I do. And my workload is intense. I know many people who are like, don't burn yourself out. Many people are like, I can't do everything you do. But the way my business has grown, the way I've been able to help the community with the way I've been able to change mindsets, challenge institutions, educate people, and just make
Mm,
people feel overall valued, not just because of me, but because they are putting in the work and realizing that person centered leadership and empathic leadership and stories in general can help them live their best life is so beautiful to see. And so often it's so little because of me and so much because of the strengths of the community.
that's cool. That's cool. Uh, I know that you mentioned earlier that you went through some mental health issues growing up. Uh, can you elaborate a little bit about it? Because it's interesting that you went from here to here,
Mm-hmm.
and I get it. Traumatic events does create that fallout, right?
Mm-hmm.
But uh, just elaborate a little bit about that drastic transition and what you did to pull yourself back out of it.
Absolutely. I will say I will be a little vague because I want to make sure not to trigger
Sure.
the audience. Absolutely. That there have been some really intense stuff that I'm going to leave out in particular.
Understood, sir.
Um, but so when I was a youth, I lost my father at the age of like just about 8 years old. He himself had dealt with a lot of really intense mental health needs. I'm gonna leave him out because his story is his. I don't want to overshare or talk about something, especially when
Sure.
that person isn't around.
Sure.
But I spent a lot of my time in school very much dealing with with bipolar disorder, anxiety, OCD, a variety of things kicking in. And when I say I learned how broken that system was,
Mm,
um, a lot of my student teachers gave up on me very quickly because I was processing very intense anger
mm,
through the bipolar disorder. But there weren't a lot of people actually teaching me how to communicate or like how to process that. It very quickly became, oh, the student's disruptive. Let's just make sure he doesn't talk or doesn't communicate if he's upset.
sure.
I also dealt with through like elementary and middle school teachers who had taken like this really deep dislike of me. I remember my fifth grade teacher, if I got mad and I yelled, she would like buckle over the desk and scream in my face that I was a problem. Luckily, like the school, I fully acknowledged that was not okay. And when she, quote unquote, retired, they actually threw a party because she was so bad at her job. That's what my principal told me. And in middle school, I had a couple people who took like this really dislike, like really strong dislike of me from teachers and other individuals, and they would take what was the rantings of a youth going through some really intense emotions as like legitimate, like this person's a monster kind of mindset. But it really wasn't until I was about in my, I think like sophomore, junior high school, I got put in a really beautiful program at a local school here in Colorado. And one of the first things was that I learned in this program, because it took me a while to actually feel truly comfortable. And there were a lot of other youth who were really struggling at the time. And I'll be honest, in this time, there were many like national programs that deemed me too hard to work with because people took a dislike to me, which was never actually the case.
Mm,
Um, I started transitioning into this program in high school. And what I noticed very quickly was the temperaments change. Like people who actually knew what they were doing, they knew how to handle situations. They didn't try to like restrain me or hold me back. They would help me process the emotions. And that was really for the first time in a long time that I started acknowledging, oh, okay, I can heal from this. Like, not all teachers are what I experienced.
mm,
And then after that, it kept getting better. There were a couple hiccups. A no human's journey is really a linear path, like especially with tragedy. There is so much falling backwards and moving forward, even within the neurodiverse and mental health community, especially. And so I got into college. It's something many people said I would never do. Got a
mm.
writing degree, something many people said I would never do. But I
Okay.
realized really quickly as I got older that there were still a lot of conflicting things. And again, falling back, moving forward. But I found myself starting to work in healthcare. I actually had worked with the neurodiverse community since high school because I was one of the people who really knew where they were coming from at like the local church and things. But I started realizing one, I did not like working at retail whatsoever, but I also knew I really wanted a passion, something that would make me feel like I had a purpose. And it took me through multiple jobs. But there was a big moment in my life when I actually ended up in healthcare. And I went, I'm really good at this. I can mentor people, I can help people deal with things. And my own personal experiences were this really beautiful insight into how people should treat people. And then in 2021, that point in my life, I'd slipped back a little bit. But I had this moment where a few things hit. I said, one, I really got to get my life together.
Mm, mhm,
Two, I need to start treating myself better. I need to really like, instead of just helping people, I need to really hone down what my healing journey is going to be like. And when I was at that point where it's like, I really messed up in a lot of ways, I need to get better. Storytelling was actually this one of the few things that really cut through a lot of that pain in that moment. And I remember the moment I launched my business, not just because it was so exciting, but I remember my thought process being, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna have to do this right. And ever since I've done that, not just in my day job, not in everything. It's given me this focus and this mindset, especially now with all the successes and everything that I've had. It's really honed down what my healing journey has really become and what it will be continue to be, especially because no mental health journey again is
Mm,
linear, but
mm,
there's always those days where you can have that one moment that can send you backwards in the worst
mm.
possible way.
Yes,
But
indeed.
since then, it's been really beautiful. I've healed from so much. I've been able to help so many other people. And I think a key focus of that is the idea that I really need to heal from these like massive wounds. Sorry, that's very long. Didn't mean to go that
Oh
deep,
no,
but
that's fine, brother. That's fine. I appreciate that because I was going to ask about the storytelling.
Mhm.
Uh, how do you implement storytelling as a method to help the the people that you work for?
Absolutely. So there's a variety of ways from my public speaking where I share about my own story and methods to help people to Dungeons and Dragons, which I use to help build public speaking, mindfulness, self-advocacy skills, really to everything. There's one thing I've fully well, not always fully understood, but really understood about storytelling, and that is that storytelling is probably the art form that has lasted as long as humanity has. I've gone back in history, I've looked at cave drawings through books and things, and storytelling seems to be that art form that truly connects, educates, informs, motivates, inspires, and helps people really feel their worth. We see it in movies, we see it in books, we see it in audiobooks. Like, if we really think about it, storytelling is so interwoven, not just into the community, but to our daily lives. We're always telling stories in some way, we're always doing some form of communicating through storytelling. And so when I recognize that, I go, okay, if it's one on one or a group or otherwise, I really hone down into what can I do to get someone to communicate, to ask questions, to think about themselves, to think about others. And that can be a massive variety of options, but it really starts with human connection, the open discussion of honesty and like emotional connection with a person, but also honoring who they are more than just a physical realm of accessibility, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and making sure that it's not always me talking. It's opening other people up avenues for people to think about their actions, think about what they want to do, and what they want to be, and then giving them the opportunity to be themselves in a constructive space that truly wants to foster and encourage them. There's so much more I could do. I know these conversations. I could do full lectures that are 10 hours long about this. But so much of it is making sure voices are heard, making sure they're shared, and making sure people don't feel shame
Mm,
or misery or
mhm,
hatred of themselves for not only sharing their voice, but asking questions and actively adding to stories.
mm. I'm glad you mentioned that because that was a perfect segue to my next question. I looked through your company website.
Mhm.
Nice website, by the way.
Thank you.
And I read your mission statement, and
Mhm.
that really caught my attention. And I'm going to read it.
Okay.
It says this: to advocate through shared storytelling that embraces mental health and world culture and builds up the world around us with love and compassion. My question for you, Thomas,
Mhm.
is how can people embrace their mental health when many are scared to open up about it?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. I love that one.
Hmm.
The first thing I would love to say it's as simple as just raise up your voice, in all honesty. I think the big thing right now is finding that community, those people you feel comfortable with. Um, I'm going to be honest, especially I think in this world where we have oversaturation of the news, and within that kind of a disregard for like the general, seemingly disregard for like people's mental health with like the mass reporting on all these horrible situations and kind of a lot of people's still bias. I think so much of it is sharing your voice. It very much is. There's a lot of power, a lot of healing when people feel heard. But I think it's also in that, like starting to heal, starting to claim that it requires the right people, it requires the right communities. And it also takes something that I think a lot of us with mental health have been taught at a very young age to disregard, which is pride and love for ourselves. Um, I have been through so much in my life. I've been through so much hurt. And
Mm,
so often the people who have intentionally hurt me have
mm,
worked so hard to shame,
mm. That,
humiliate, and try to
yeah.
take away my power.
Mm,
And that's
mm.
why I say it's not like this perfect journey. But when we can start defending ourselves, raising up our voices, fighting for what we need, not like physically fighting, but like fighting against the darkness of the world,
Sure.
we have that beginning. And that's why I think the right people are so important in the right spaces.
That's a profound answer to the question, because I mentioned, this in other or previous shows, that we need to start speaking up and start speaking out, and we have to do it with courage and with faith that what you do and how you project yourself is going to be accepted. Uh, and even if it isn't accepted, keep going, because it's
Mm-hmm.
your life. You have to embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And God makes no mistakes. We just have to learn to roll with what He gave us,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I appreciate that answer, sir. What are some methods that you use to help these kids manage their symptoms?
So, one of the big ones is a strength-based mindset. I
Strength-based
have
mindset?
a strengths-based mindset. So, like, very similar to what I said earlier, not shaming people for essentially just dealing with their autistic symptoms,
Yeah.
not using the mindset. Like I hear this a lot, and a lot from a lot of people, and I've definitely heard it from people that I wish I hadn't, which is the idea of, oh, this was really cool what you did, but here's like the 16 things that I didn't like, and then this is why this is bad, this is why this is bad kind of mindset. Like
Mm-mm.
also that double-edged sword, or like the faux compliment of like, oh, that's really cool, but I don't, it kind of looks immature or stuff like that, when it comes to project and school works and sharing of story. But what I love about a strengths-based mindset is it takes those frankly toxic mentalities, and when applied well, it can be utilized to help youth really start to acknowledge what they're good at, what their strengths are, and it can help build a stronger confidence, a understanding, because it's something I run into a lot of the youth, a lot of the adults I work with over apologize because they've been taught by people who shouldn't teach them this, that they are automatically wrong for asking questions, or automatically wrong if they're having a moment where they're distracted because of ADHD or autism or a really hard day. So I use a lot of that. I also work very hard to acknowledge that there are going to be bad days, but a great person first mindset, or person centered mindset, can take those bad days and have those honest, very sometimes very hard conversations about, I know you're having a hard day, but
Mm.
what I would love is, can we work on this way? Can we redirect? Um, Another big thing is keeping calm. I see way too many providers when someone's upset, they get upset and then they snap at that individual, that person yells, then the mindset quickly degrades into, oh, this person had a really bad day and it's their fault and they were a problem in X, Y, and Z. I really work to challenge the like problem client or problem student mindset, because once you do that, you label that person and they will never fully recover from that.
Mm,
And
mhm,
the other thing that I would say is just a lot of forgiveness. Like the work I do is hard. It takes up a lot of my energy. I have to be able to forgive myself, but I have to acknowledge um, that a lot of the youth I work with, they're not forgiven a lot.
mm,
They're not told because they had a bad day that things will get better. It's really sad, but there are so many people, especially with parents who are burnt out and are not receiving the level of care that they need, and so they have other parents projecting shame on them because their kid isn't fully, like, their shirt has splotches on it and they clearly have autism, and so parents, do that whisper thing of, oh, isn't this bad, and they complain to schools, all of these things. There's a lot of really bad networks out there. But forgiveness of the youth, forgiveness of parents, forgiveness of adults,
yeah,
there's a reason why I'm being forgiven and being treated well and with empathy. These are things we crave because they're good for us. They're good for our soul, our mind,
yeah,
our body. And if we can
agreed.
work more to really be strengths based and stop shaming people so much, like certain degree of shame is very helpful. Um, but not the level that I see from a lot of people, not on social media, which social media is very good for a lot of things, not that,
Mm,
not on a lot of things. And yeah, I could ramble and ramble again, but yeah, that's the core of it.
nice. Were there any roadblocks that you encountered?
Yeah, I'll be honest. When I first start this work, when I do this work, one of the biggest roadblocks that I encounter, um, like when it's new people, one of the first things I see is so many youth, so many adults are first they're anxious about a situation. They're not sure if they want to be there. But I witness a lot of roadblocks of like someone coming in and they're anxious because someone else told them that they were upset, or if a parent's really stressed, there's a roadblock of them being like overly stressed with their youth or their family member, even if they're adults. There's also like the genuine roadblock for a lot of people of I've been told I'm wrong all the time, which it does happen to people.
Mm,
And they are trying to assess me if I'm going to continue that cycle of neglect and anger and hostility towards them. Um, and for myself, what I run into and a lot of the time is my own imposter syndrome and my own worries about sliding back into who I've been at my worst points and all of these things. And they're very real. They're valid. Each person has them. And the thing I like about roadblocks is the mentality that it takes a crew to kind of chip away at them. And they have to know each other, they have to communicate well. And eventually that roadblock will be gone, but there are still pieces of that roadblock left. And we have to work together to clear them out completely.
mm, okay, okay. Uh, Here's another question for you. In your bio, you also mentioned that it collaborated with local Colorado charities about finding meaning after experiencing loss. The question, how does one find meaning, Thomas,
So
after
I
a
think that
loss?
is so different for each person.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I will speak for myself and what I've helped people with. Um, I think that meaning, one, can come from community. It can come from understanding our pain. It can come from simply laughing in a simple moment. One of the stories that I did at that event in particular was I told the story of a little girl bunny for the kids there, and it was about a little girl who always wanted to talk and always wanted to interact and play. And she had a friend who didn't show up to school for a couple days. And then eventually she ran into her, but she didn't see the father anymore with her friend. and that happened for a few days. Um, and then she tried to play with a friend, tried to get her to play. And
Mm,
one day she just sat down and was quiet, and her friend cried. And that little bunny learned that day that she would sit there as long as needed. And her friend came back to school, and that little girl just sat with her each day and sat with her friend. And obviously, the message in the story is we don't always have to be on, we don't always have to be perfect. Sometimes there's a real power in just sitting with people. And the two main things about that is one, meaning can literally be just being with someone and absorbing their pain a little bit or being there in the quiet moments. But the other thing in that I really loved about that story I came up with was so often with human beings, meaning just comes from being with the right people and thinking and honoring whatever it can be and having those people who can just be or laugh or cry with us when we need them to.
mm, mhm. Miss Wilson, what's next for you in your journey? I mean, I know you're doing a lot, but what's next on the horizon for you?
Right now, I'm working on some classes that I've started with a variety of students. I'm getting out there, trying to get into some conventions, doing more public speaking talks. I already have a couple potentially lined up in the next few months. One in October, specifically about finding employment, another on mentoring youth. Um, Other than that, there's so many D&D groups and storytelling events that I have planned. I'm going to be at a resource fair here shortly. Um, and I have to say, I'm genuinely excited. I'm really looking forward to what the future has. I don't know what all of it is, but I know it's going to involve stories. I know there's going to be a lot of new groups, a lot of new events. And if anyone is interested in finding out and having those conversations with me, please reach out. Um, but I think the thing that I'm most excited about is just in the next few months, in the next year, I'm sure, just having new opportunities to meet new people, to expand my understanding of the world, and to share more stories with the community and watch other people take that inspiration.
Minute that. How can people reach you?
Absolutely. So my email, I always welcome people. I'll make sure it's provided. Is ndttrpg at gmail. I did not realize how similar all those letters sound when I created that email. But I also have a website, RH Creative Advocacy and Storytelling.net. Um, on top of that, if you also want to reach out to me, I have my link tree. I'll make sure that's in there. And then the other main thing, I've mentioned it several times, but if anyone has any kind of questions or just wants to ask one quick one or have a conversation, please reach out. I love questions. I love getting to talk about my work, and I'd love to see more and more people doing this work.
Awesome. Thomas Wilson, it has been a pleasure taking this time to speak with you and learning a lot about uh, the autism field because I wasn't really privy to uh, all that's out there and the list of services like yours that are doing the work and hopefully will continue to do the work. So I really appreciate that, sir.
Thank you very much. It's
Mm.
been an absolute blast talking.
Yes, sir. And I will look forward to possibly having you back on to check on your progress.
That would be lovely.
All right, sir. Well, thank you guys for watching the Speaker Truth with Mark Ross podcast. Uh, I want to say something here and I'll end it. Uh, take care of your mental health, guys. Don't take it for granted. Don't let anyone get you down, about what you're going through. Don't let anyone get in your head. Uh, Seek help. Talk to people that really care about you
Mhm.
and just keep it moving. Keep one foot in front of the other, guys. Don't give up. Don't give up. This is why we are doing what we're doing right here, because we've been there. We know what it is. We are here talking for a reason. This is a reason why we are here, to illustrate to the masses that mental health is real, and it's something that we cannot take for granted anymore. So with that said, remember, self-care is important. So please make your mental health and your physical health a priority every day first. You guys be blessed. You too, Thomas.
Thank you. You as well. And to everyone else.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
You too.